Many thanks, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background report. Now we have guests here in the studios to discuss issues around election security. And as indicated, just 19 days to the first set of elections on the 25th of this month. Let's welcome Lebari Sam Undu, who is Director in charge of security at the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Sam Undu, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Also here with us in the studios is regular on Good Morning Nigeria, Dr. Habila Joshak, a retired Deputy Inspector General of Police. And of course, in the course of his duty, he had a lot of activities to handle regarding elections and security there too. Dr. Joshak, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us in the studio is Dr. Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Expert. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Equally joining us in the conversation is Paul James, Director, Election Program, YAGA Africa.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, gentlemen, once again, it's our pleasure to have you join us. The reason why we are focusing on election security is because of the occurrences in the polity. The cash crunch is probably one of the latest, and some optimistic estimates indicate that that might soon be over. We're having fuel crisis. Again, that is also being tackled. But banditry goes on in some parts of the country. And in the southeast, the criminal elements there are unrelenting in their various activities. And so voters want to be sure that they are safe. Election officials also want to be sure that they are safe. Monitors and observers also want to be sure that they are safe. 8 years ago, in 2015, the elections were postponed by 6 weeks in order to bring normality, as it were, to the northeastern part of the country. Are we faced with the same crisis in 2023? Let's begin with the Director of Security at INEC.
Thank you. I think that 2023, all things being equal, as economics will say, when we were in secondary school, on the part of INEC, we have done everything we need to do to ensure that the election goes on as planned. Materials, sensitive and non-sensitive, have been delivered. Training is going on. As I speak now, today, we are training security personnel at the senatorial level of the country. Every senatorial level, the training will take place today. We started since Friday at the state level, Friday, Saturday. Today we'll be at the senatorial level. Tomorrow we'll be at the local government level. We are training security operatives, security personnel, paramilitary personnel, observers, those who want to work with us. We are training them because, one, if they are not trained, they won't know their critical role on the day of election. Election is a process. Election day is just one day of activity in the whole process. So we need to let them understand what it takes, what they need to do, what they don't need to do, when and how. And the chairman of the commission has graciously approved the training through the training arm of the commission, the Electoral Institute. This engagement has been going on at the national level, at the state level, and they have been working with ICES, the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, on what to do, how to do, where and when. The training is becoming important because you cannot send a man to the field without the tools, without knowing what to do. If he doesn't have the skill, he wouldn't know what to do. Prior to this election, on election morning, you will see police training their men, doing parade. But because of the training and the interaction and consultation and engagement, even if they will do parade in the morning, it has to be very early so that these men will lead the electoral personnel and the materials to the point of voting by 8 a.m. So we have secured that. We have secured that arrangement, and because even in the off-cycle election that just passed, they did it kindly for us, and we continue engaging them, and we know that all things being equal, like I said earlier, the elections will take place. INEC is not contemplating shifting the election or postponing it. It's not in our agenda, it's not in our calendar.
Yes, we'll come to that in the course of the conversation, actually, when we go deeper
And
into
just,
yes.
and just a reminder that in August last year, the Office of the Inspector General of Police, in consultation with other stakeholders, kicked off election security management workshops in various locations across the country for the police and other persons responsible for election security management. Do you mind?
Yeah, indeed. I wanted to bring in Dr. Habila Joshak, who has been involved in the election, I believe, from the beginning in 2009 to now, which is almost 24 years. I would like you to tell us, and so that the viewers would know, what is the driving force behind election violence or election insecurity during elections, and who do you think pushed this violence itself?
Well, election insecurity is as a result of contest by candidates, those of them that would want to have the opportunity to be somewhere in a position of authority. And in doing that, there are a lot of interest group. And we've seen a situation where sometimes it becomes very, very germane, and a lot of people who feel that if they don't do some of the things, they won't be able to have opportunity to aspire to a position of authority. And so there are so many factors that are responsible for election insecurity. The contestant themselves would want to ensure that they do everything possible to gain prominence and to be elected into a position that they have seek to acquire. We also have a lot of the people also who also would want their own person to be given opportunity to rule. And so we have a lot of interest groups, and some of these groups on their own would want to truncate the process by making sure that they cut corners and create problem and chaos. And so who is to be blamed? It's all those that are involved in the process of ensuring that theirs have a place in governance in the dispensation that is about, to be contested.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Habila Joshak. And let me come to Dr. Kabir Adamu. Just a way of restating the first question I asked the Director of Security at INEC. What are the security threats, if any, in your opinion, to the elections commencing in just about 3 weeks?
Thank you once again, Kingsley. So election security management has now become extremely institutionalized. There are tools that are out there that help election management bodies such as INEC to identify threats to security, as it were. Now, INEC is using a tool which it calls FMAT, which is the Election Violence Mitigation Tool. It's a tool that allows INEC to identify, evaluate, and then put forward mitigation measures for managing electoral risk. Now, the risk can be divided into two: the internal risk and then the external risk. For internal risk is a range of activities, including INEC itself. Now, just like the director has said, as an external evaluator, I'm extremely comfortable with the processes that INEC has adopted to manage its risk. The challenge, however, are the external risks, some of which have been identified by Dr. Habila. I just want to add the existence of non-state armed groups We've discussed this extensively in previous conversations with you, but they range from the terrorist groups in the northeast, such as the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah al-Dawati wal-Jihad and the Islamic State in West Africa province, to groups like the indigenous people of Biafra, to the bandits and others in northwest and north central Nigeria. Now they pose an existential threat to the elections themselves. Just on Wednesday last week, in Bakuri and surrounding locations in Katsina, a group of vigilantes, when the incident happened on Wednesday, were told 40. As of today, we're looking at a figure of around 100 persons killed by those known state armed groups, specifically in Bakuri. And that is the environment with which we're going to conduct an elections. Another one, which is also very worrisome, and I'm quoting the Inspector General of Police himself, are the state-level security structures. These are security structures that have been created by state governments, and as you're aware, security still remains in the exclusive list. So if state governments create security structures, how are they going to play into election security management? As an example, if the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security that the director mentioned puts up a framework for managing all of this risk that we've mentioned, what role are these state structures going to play? The IG has declared them as illegal, and he did this in a public forum. However, we have not seen the other activities that will follow that would now either make them neutral or that would clarify to Nigerians what role these state-level security structures will play during the elections. INEC has also come up with what it calls an election program policy, which is quite extensive. I was very happy seeing that document. That document provides the framework for which INEC is running the elections. And inside it, there is a component that has to do with security. So back to my earlier statement, I'm extremely happy with what INEC is doing to manage the elections. The other part that I'm a little bit worried, and I'm hoping we'll expand that conversation as we go ahead, is the role of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. It's supposed to have 3 levels: at the federal level, the state level, and then possibly at the local government level. Now it comprises all the security organizations, and the director will correct me, I think about 20 of them, that play different roles in managing election security. Of course, the police is the lead agency, and that is why the Inspector General is a co-chair of that committee. Now, it has been meeting regularly at the federal level. And I'm aware that the Inspector General issued a circular directing that committee should also be meeting at the state level. But in my interaction, and believe me, I do interact in this field, I haven't seen that level of activity at the state level. Now, why is this important? All of these threat elements that we've mentioned don't exist in absentia. They exist in a location, and most of them at the state level. Now, if the activity is more vibrant at the federal level and less at the state level, then it means we're leaving a gap. So I'm not sure why the Inspector General's directive was not complied with for the state level access to be functional. I think it's very important. Lastly, the role of the Electoral Institute that the director mentioned. The IFMAT, that tool that I said is world-class, is being deployed by the Electoral Institute. And I'm aware that currently the Electoral Institute is actually doing that, trying to understand at the regional level what the risk elements are. Now, it did that, I think, around early last year, got an understanding of the security situation in the country, and then is also doing another one. So clearly trying to put forward mitigation measures. But the challenge, and I think this is the legacy of the military rule, the control that INEC has over members of ICSES. So that I can summarize my thoughts. In conclusion.
Yeah, we will. I will pause you rather, okay. Dr. Kabir, because earlier you said we would have a conversation around the role of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. We will come to that and then further unpack the interaction between the committee at the national level and then the committee at the subnational level, and why they appear to be waiting for instructions as to what to do with just barely 3 weeks to the commencement of the general elections. Let's bring in now Paul James, Director of Election Program at YAGA Africa. What is YAGA reading with respect to threats to the 2023 elections?
I think for us at Yaga and every other citizen observer that is following the process, we are hugely concerned about the 2023, and also we are at the moment where we are doing what people will call reading between the lines, whether or not these elections will happen. I'm saying this because of some recent activities that we had conducted, and also some indicators that we saw from the activity. In December of last year, we deployed our 774 observers across the 36 states and the FCT to assist with recruiting observers that will deploy for the presidential and the gubernatorial election. And the first sign that we are seeing is that there are communities in this country that have been deserted because of the ongoing activities of the criminal elements. And then because we are recruiting at the polling unit level, so potentially there could be some polling units where INEC may not be able to conduct the elections come February 25th or March 11th. But then the challenge is that you don't also have this information out there, so that from both the security angle and also the INEC, you see some planning happening. There are places, for instance, currently, about 9 states that I know of: Niger, Nasarawa, Anambra, in Enugu, in Ebonyi, and then in the belt of the northwestern states, Katsina, Sokoto, Zamfara, that we know, based on the activities that we conducted, that people have deserted those communities. So what becomes of these people? And beyond that also is that the indicators that we are seeing, internal threats, especially from the politicians, some of these utterances make you to begin to wonder whether or not we live in the same environment, or these people are sane or are truly pro-democracy, as all of us will wish that these things happen. So what are the concerns for us? Barely 2 weeks or 3 weeks to the election, what you are seeing is that these stakeholders are more reactive than proactive. You expect to see communications, for instance, that will inspire confidence from the security agencies. But you don't see much of that happening, because most times this kind of engagement are episodic. They are limited to just the period of the election, when you begin to see security do what they call show of force. And then if you are doing show of force then without inspiring the confidence before the election, of course, whatever threat that I have seen, a voter may have seen before the election, could be the basis of which the voter may want to either participate or not participate in the process. So for us, that is the concern, the kind of communication that is coming from the security quarters. It is not reassuring at the moment, and we're hoping that in the coming days we'll see improvement.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring in Mr. Lebari now. Can you tell us the level of interagency collaboration ahead of the 2023 general election with security agencies and CSOs?
Yes, thank you for that question. The Interagency Committee on Election Security at the federal level has been having a robust engagement with all the member agencies, both military and paramilitary. I know that the NSA, who is the co-chair, I know that the co-chair is NSA and INEC, but the IG as a lead agency has been directed or was mandated by the agency to get the states to be actively involved with the Commissioner of Police and the Resident Electoral Commissioner as co-chair at the state level, and the DPO and the electoral officer as co-chair at the electoral level. One of the things that has happened is that while at the national level there's robust engagement, at the state, because of the law that happened before the new electoral commissioners were appointed, most states didn't take it serious. But as at now, as it is today, I know that the states have taken it serious, just like we were going around sensitizing them. We also asked them to ensure that these meetings are held at least twice every week, so that they can be on top of the situation. They can synergize. Those who are supposed to give them intelligence will gather the intelligence, share, and then they will give it to actionable agencies that can be on top of their game. And I think it's improving. But But what I don't know is at the local level, because actually this situation will be at the local level. So it is up to the electoral officers and the DPOs to ginger themselves and do the needful, because they need to give this information to the state level, who, if they cannot handle it, will now get the national level.
But most of the violence that occurs during elections is in the states and local government levels.
Yes, because that's where the activities take place. And so, let me use myself as an example. I was an electoral officer. I was an assistant electoral officer. When I was an electoral officer in Edo, in Uromi, that's Esa Northeast, there were these plans by the youth to disrupt the election. I got the information. I couldn't handle it with the DPO, so we escalated it to the state, where Mike Igini was the resident electoral commissioner. He couldn't handle it. He escalated it to Jega, and less than 24 hours, security apparatus from Abuja came, and the matter was settled. So it is the electoral officers who should get this information, escalate it, so that solutions will be found. Because at the level where they are, most of the solutions that will be needed for that program cannot be sourced. So they need to be on top of their game.
But why do the REC have to run to the federal level
if he can solve it? If he can solve it, if himself and the commissioner of police cannot solve it, then they will have to go to up, where help will come from.
Are you saying there's no capacity at the state level to handle this sort of violence?
Not all problems do they have capacity to handle. Don't forget, we are talking of a general election in 36 states. It's not an isolated one where it is just one state, and then they can get support from other states. Now, everybody is answering his father's name. And don't forget that with the introduction of beavers in this election, there is no longer what you can do at the world level. Everything happens and ends at the polling units.
Oh, okay, thank you, Lebari Sam Undu. Let's bring in again Dr. Habila Joshak. Dr. Joshak, Kabir Adamo raises the point about the role of the Interagency Consultative Security Committee on the election, and drops the hint that while there may be activities with and around the committee at the national level, not much appears to be going on at the state level, which would say there's devolution of assignment and powers, as it were, to the state committees and perhaps the local government committees. What, in your opinion, could be the impediment to those committees activating their own machinery, do trial runs, and then get involved, have their own risk assessment, their threats, and then the opportunities, do the so-called SWOT analysis, and prepare so that, as Undu was saying a moment ago, if there are matters that are likely to be beyond their control, they can seek for help upstairs much earlier than waiting for crisis to break over their heads.
Well, in as much as I would not want to hold on the stage for the Nigerian police, I can say categorically, clearly that the observation so far has indicated that there are more of collaboration, more of coming together and analyzing some of the threats at the local level than in the federation, I mean, at the center. In fact, in the various local government, if you have opportunity to try to take a survey, you will discover that there are a lot of meetings that are spread over the communities, the traditional rulers, some of the states that have some security that they've been able to put together. Such people also are involved, traditional rulers, because a lot of people are looking at a situation where if nothing is done, some of the issues that will crop up in the local area is likely to take people's life, likely to cause destruction. And so what I have seen in most of the places, either their meetings and the rest of it, I have discovered that there is more of activities of sharing and trying to come together to see what are the threats. And you know that the Nigerian police, I know that they've gone before this time to do trade analysis, and this trade analysis I shared. This is so important that those of them that are likely to constitute nuisance, those who would want to tamper with the process and put the lives of electorates and other officials and what have you in jeopardy on election day, some of those people are taken off from the society and kept.
Where?
They are brought to answer.
In the cooler.
They are brought to answer.
I say in the cooler.
Offenses that they've done, they will have to answer for it. And so I'm very sure that the Nigerian police have been doing that. But of course, there's nothing that can be enough. This is also a wake-up call.
You know, Dr. Joshua, thank you for your response. Let's not dance around too many of these issues.
Yes.
We of course, try to give confidence to the people, try to reassure them, but we also need to interrogate some issues so that we know how prepared we are to face those issues when the time comes. Let me give you a scenario. We have seen the difficulties, for instance, in some locations, people or voters who registered getting their PVCs. Yeah. There are concerns that some of those PVCs have been hoarded. There are concerns that I've seen a video go around, and I'm sure you guys have you've probably seen that. Some PVCs dumped in septic tanks and gutters, and so on and so forth. Some persons see this as voter suppression tactics, and add that to the fact that this is a keenly contested election. So, do we know where the hotspots are and what the triggers might be for election violence? Well, we know bandits are in locations, IPOB and not IPOB, or unknown gunmen or known gunmen or men known gun. They are on the rampage in Imo and some parts of Anambra. Yes. But for situations like this, where people believe already that there are voter suppression mechanisms against them, and then the contest that we are faced with, if violence sprouts in those locations, what do we do? Dr. Kabi.
Valid concern, Kingsley. But why, when I responded earlier on, I didn't want to go, 101 as it were. I tried to provide a more strategic overview. The process of risk assessment is very clear. And I divided it into two. What you've mentioned, perhaps it's propaganda, because believe me, there is a lot of disinformation, there is a lot of misinformation, there is a lot of propaganda out there. In fact, BBC did an investigative journalistic report where they showed $45,000 is being paid to influencers on social media to do these three things that I've mentioned: misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. Now, I'm not completely ruling out the possibility that there are issues with the PVC distribution process. But I also know that INEC has done a lot to try to provide the right atmosphere and environment for the distribution of the PVCs. And they've also listened to complaints coming from the people. And what they've done is to extend the days as an example. But this is it. In identifying the risks, I mentioned that there are internal risks. Now, INEC is going to deal with 1.5 million staff, 1.4 of which are ad hoc, and then I think the rest probably permanent staff. Now, Kingsley, in identification of the risk, how many of that 1.4 are partisan? Does INEC have the capacity to ensure that those 1.4 are non-partisan? Unfortunately, I don't think so. So again, INEC is just one arm of the stakeholder process that would have to manage the election. Yes, they've got the responsibility constitutionally, but each and every one of us needs to contribute to the electoral process. If you know, as an example, that any one of that 1.4 million is partisan, and you deliberately misled INEC in recruiting that person, you've contributed to foiling the electoral process, as an example. And a lot of us are guilty of that. We actively sometimes encourage all of that. What am I trying to say? that the environment with which INEC is running the elections itself is problematic. And because that environment is problematic, we are expecting a little bit too much from INEC. Each of us will have to play a role to ensure that the transition, the electoral process, comes out better than it is at the moment. Now, having said that, I'm not absolving INEC of responsibility. We were discussing ICSES, which is the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. It's an ad hoc committee that was, I think, established around 2012 or thereabout. Now, part of the mandate of that committee, and again, I'm going to play the devil's advocate and I'm going to speak freely here. Part of that mandate requires that committee to produce a map that shows 3 levels of risk within the country: the red level, the orange level, and then the green level. Now, the idea is that by looking at that map, you know the risk elements in each of the locations. Now, imagine a situation where at the federal level, we have that map, at the state level, we have that map, and then at the local government, we have that map. That would mean probably as far back as, let's say, January 2022, we already have a good understanding of the threat profile within the country and would have been addressing those threat profiles. And that is at the external level. INEC already has an understanding of its internal risk. I'm sure of this, because that's my job. I'm a risk manager, and I know I've worked with INEC. I know they have that internally. What is missing is that map, and it's not too late. Like I said, I'm speaking freely. I'm being the devil's advocate. Between now and the elections, I am hoping, and by this platform, which is public, that the managers of this ICSES, the INEC itself, the Office of the National Security Advisor, and the Inspector General of Police, they produce that map and show to Nigerians. The voter turnout in 2019 was 34%. If we don't manage this concern that
we're looking at more.
Exactly. So if we don't manage the concern that Nigerians have at the moment, we may not see more. So like my brother here mentioned, we need to be forward-looking. We need to be proactive in terms of putting forward solutions, raising public confidence, so that Nigerians have the confidence to come out.
But that would not be a static map, I imagine, because when you do access international occurrences, they will say this is the highest level of alert, which is red you're talking about. At some point, it's downgraded to amber, which is orange, and then, of course, it comes down to green. It's not a static map. It should be fluid.
Not at all.
But
I think I know where you're headed. The Electoral Institute, which is the manager of the external risk management component for INEC, its hope is to have a parallel process of updating this transient risk, as it were. But funding is a challenge. It's not easy. So one of the things I'm hoping is not possible in the 2023 elections, but going forward, AI is one option that we should go. Like, I run a consultancy, and we've adopted AI. If you go to...
Sorry, an AI could be amnesty. It could be artificial intelligence. It could be...
Which
no. Alternative intelligence. So which AI are you referring to?
Artificial intelligence. In summary, thank you, Kingsley.
Okay, still talking about the risk factor. Apart from the physical fear of insecurity during the elections, there's also fear of cyber attack on the election results.
So the entire risk spectrum, as it were, we can't, even if we dedicate a whole 24 hours to discuss the risk spectrum, it won't be enough. But let's divide them into those two, internal and external. Now, embedded in that is cybersecurity. But the work, and this is, I think, part of what I'm hoping INEC would do. The Director of Security is here. They have a risk management department. I'm hoping to see a marriage between that security department and the risk department, because that is what the world does now. Security, physical security that he does, and the risk management, they work together. They are Siamese twins. You can't separate them. So going forward, I'm hoping to see they adopt technology, including AI. And INEC has done, frankly, INEC, in terms of its risk management framework, is one of the best public institutions in the country at the moment. What we do when we talk about risk management is aim to achieve resilience. And I think INEC is probably one of the few organizations in Nigeria that has attained resilience. In other words, even if there is an attack on certain facilities of INEC, it has the capacity to function. And we've seen it. In 2022 alone, there were, I think, more than 50 attacks on INEC facilities. How many organizations in Nigeria will sustain 50 attacks and still be able to operate? Very few. So that's why I'm saying, as a risk manager, an external one, I am very happy with the role INEC is playing. It is the role of the Public Security Department that I'm hoping to see improved going forward.
But you look again at the external threats, and Paul James, I'm coming back to you. I don't know, Kabir tended to have downplayed some of the incidents that are occurring ahead of the elections, PVC collection, and the impressions being created in the minds of persons. Yes, those who are engaging in misinformation, disinformation, and outright fake news have been at their work. But we do know that some persons have had real challenges getting their PVCs, and some PVCs have been exhumed from gutters and septic tanks. And as I said, some framed all of this around voter suppression tactics. Now, on voting day, if some of these tactics were to also come up, what would be the outcome?
Well, I think when Dr. Kabir was making his own submissions, I was like, wow, are we in the same planet? Because as much as I also wouldn't want to put all of this on the doorstep of INEC, I really want us to expand the conversation to look at also the activities of other stakeholders and how it will impact on the election. So if you look at the entire ecosystem of election violence, you look at it as any acts of violence directed at individuals or materials that are involved in the electoral process that are intended to undermine the process. And then you look at also indicators that could trigger this violence. And so we are seeing some of these indicators. Beyond also the concern around INEC, if we expand it to even the judiciary, for instance, you begin to see some frivolous court judgment and also how people are reacting to that. We saw what happened recently in Osun, and also, of course, which is a foretaste of what to expect as we go into the election in 2023. And also, if you look at also the history of violence, you go back to some states and what has happened in the 2019, and also what we are beginning to see already as we build up to the 2023. It's not like we don't have this information, but what is concerning is the reaction to some of these things as they're happening. And then INEC also is perceived sometimes as not providing the kind of information that people want. That's why I say INEC sometimes seems to be reactive and not proactive. For instance, there was a time that some videos were flying all over the space about people collecting information from PVCs. It was a good exercise by INEC. INEC was trying to harvest people's locations so they could provide information about where people should pick up their PVCs. But then the way the information went out was seen in the negative light because there was no sort of a prior communication to voters to expect something like this to happen from INEC. And so that is why INEC also is perceived in that light, that they don't always go out, provide the prior information until that happens. We have also concern, even within INEC, people complaining about how INEC is treating voters perhaps in some region different from how they are treating voters in other regions, or even ethnic profiling in some engagements of the process, like the CVR process that happened, and even in the PVC collection that is happening. You realize that in some location you hear the process will start early, in some location officials don't resume when they are expected to resume. Of course, that is supposed to, I mean, that will stir those kind of negative reactions from the public. So it's about how INEC also react to it that will help to inspire that confidence, like we keep saying. But speaking about other stakeholders, if we think about the political parties and what they are doing in the process, they have limited the engagement to just seeing voters as willing to. We can always get them when we want. And so this is the time when they need the voters, and they will go to any length to get the voters, and that is why we're seeing all of this happening. But how are also the security agencies reacting to some of these things, that some of these happenings in this space? We have seen also the rise of hate speech in political campaign. And then there are sanctions to some of this. Why are we not applying sanctions? Are we also, is this selective justice that is happening? If this is not treated now, definitely this is a monster that is waiting to explode in the future. People will definitely react when things don't favor them based on what they have seen in the build-up to the election.
Okay, Mr. Paul, thank you so much. Let me bring in Mr. Libari to react to some of the things you've said.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Let me quickly react to the first phase, the one they said voter suppression tactics of getting these PVCs from septic tanks and all that. Let's clear the air on this issue once and for all. Once those videos came up, INEC set up a high-powered committee that looked into this matter, moved to this location, examined scientifically and empirically these cards, and we discovered that most of it were not our cards. They were cards used in 2007, which is not the one we are using. People collected cards at that time. It was free. They could collect it. So when they discovered that those cards were no longer functional, they now decided to trace it, drop it in the gutters and all that. We did an extensive investigation, and the result was published. The truth of the matter is, INEC alone is just constitutionally the major stakeholder. Every person in this country is a stakeholder in the electoral process. Like I've always said, Nigerians have refused to own the process. If you own the process, you will know when it starts, you will know how it is going, you will make your contribution, and INEC will just tap on those things. INEC, in the case of distribution of PVCs, INEC has engaged all critical stakeholders. And that's the reason why INEC, before they send the cards out, they kept it in the unit, in the ward, and in the local government level. So it is not true that INEC does not give these things. The truth of the matter is, most of the people who make these claims are people who did double registration, and INEC uses this system to clear them out. I'll give an instance. I supervise the registration in Bayelsa, and you see people coming to register, and you say, why are you coming? He said, they asked me to come and register. You said, do you have a card? He will bring it. And we told them, if you have a card, go. Your card is valid. You don't need to register again, because if you register, your name will not appear. This card that you have will become invalid. And that's what is playing out in most states. People wanted to make their number big, so they sent people for double registration. And INEC, in its wisdom, cleared them out. Just like he said, they will clear them out of the society. Those who did double registration cannot register in this election. They can't vote. They are the ones who make trouble. Oh, we register, we are not giving our cards. It's not true. Those who register genuinely, just like he said about information, we reach out to them. We send messages to them. Just like I'm talking now, INEC is doing what we call migration. There are some polling units that have more than necessary numbers. So, and there are some polling units that have 10, 20, 30. INEC is migrating people from the old unit to the new unit. And as I speak, INEC is sending information, text messages, calling the people, reminding them at least 2 weeks to the election, so that they will know that you are no longer going to vote at polling unit A, you will vote at polling unit B. INEC is doing that. The exercise is on. The state resident electoral commissioners have been mandated by the chairman to intensify this activity, so that everybody will know that at the end of the day, if you were voting in A, and because of the migration, you are now sent to B, when election day comes, you don't go to A, you just go to B, and resident electoral commissioners have consulted committees to involve stakeholders at the local level to be involved in this. So I think INEC is doing is best.
Who are the stakeholders at the local level?
The local level, the chiefs, the churches, the civil society organizations, the community-based organizations. They are involved. And this list is printed and given out to them so that the information, even if the one INEC is sending doesn't get to the people, they can disseminate the information to the people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labari Sam Undu. We had back-to-back conversations on PVC collection
Yes.
on the studios, and Director of Voter Education at INEC was one of our guests. We also had the Deputy Director in charge of ICT also as our guest in one of the conversations. And we had our correspondents from different parts of the country. And some of the challenges that they were having at that time were highlighted with regard to PVC collection, which was why INEC had to extend the deadline. I recall that in one of the conversations we were told that there were 11 million PVCs
Uncollected.
still to be collected. I don't know what the numbers are now. And so if persons had challenges collecting their PVCs, it wasn't as if they were crying wolf.
No, I'm not saying
There were also persons, the issue of double registration was discussed extensively, and those who wouldn't qualify if they did double registration. And that again would have been the fault of the political parties and the candidates who are the beneficiaries of votes that are cast in an election. So if you didn't enlighten your constituents or your supporters properly on the process for CBR, then that of course becomes their headache. But again, let's not look. When I raise the issue of voter suppression tactics, it's not common. It happens in the U.S.
We're not disputing that.
It happens in the U.S. There are voter suppression tactics, threats to voters in some locations, threats of arrest over alimony, default, and so on and so forth. There are all kinds of things that happen. And of course, that's why I'm saying that, look, we know voting will start late in some locations.
Yeah.
And persons will say, why did they arrive late? The same thing with the process of collecting PVC. PVC were supposed to run from 9 to 3. Some will not come until 11. Our correspondents were telling us. That's why I said, in the course of voting now, how do we avoid all of that? Back again to Dr. Joshak, Dr. Habila Joshak. Dr. Habila Joshak, look at the entire environment, as we said, the amber, the green, and more likely the red in some locations. Are we likely to see a calming down? Because we have just about 2 weeks. Are we likely to see a calming down of tensions and anxiety and insecurity? Or can we pacify those locations that are still red hot and be sure that elections are conducted?
Well, it will be out of place to say that everything is set and that we can go to sleep and go to cast our votes. But I think, and as it is, without the content of the localities, without people collaborating with the security agencies at the local level, a lot of these issues that has to do with tampering with the process will be seen. And what I'm saying is collaboration. The Nigerian police is the lead agency for inter services in terms of election, and it doesn't stop at that. These traditional rulers and other individuals in the society at the local level will be very, very important and relevant. And that's why in most of the elections, you have to leverage on them, bring them in. They're the ones that will even let you know, those of them that are trying to plan to truncate the process. And so in an attempt to ensure that this process of election that we're facing, to ensure that it's smooth, we must collaborate. We must deliberate. We must include the local communities, the traditional rulers, and all other those that are responsible for, contributing to elections. And so What I'm saying is, yes, the security agencies and other people that are involved have records of people who are likely to pose a threat in most of the localities in the region, in the division, and in the localities. This is a public clear. And in order to douse that is to share these ideas with the locals. And sharing with them, in every community, people are aware. People are aware of those characters that are posing a threat and insecurity within that community. We have all this. And I know that the threat analysis that was done by the Nigerian police were shared. And if those ones are implemented, because there are people that must be taken away, otherwise they're going to be threats. And in doing that, the communities must be involved. And so it is not the police thing alone, and it is not INEC alone, but it is the responsibility of everyone to contribute and to come over and say what exactly is happening. And that's why we're insisting that the Nigerian police should go ahead and continue and must return back the police post and the police station that are right in the interior, not just the police division. Because once you have police stations in the interior and police are spread right to the end, there's no one that would want to commit crime or commit crime, and yet he will not be identified.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We'll come back after this break to, as the program begins to wind out, to find out, talk about solutions to the electoral insecurity that might occur during the 2023 general elections. We'll take a break. When we return. Okay.
The new Milo 3-in-1 Milky and Creamy is truly milky and contains calcium. So, no need to add milk for that rich, creamy cup, which helps to nourish and energize your kids. Milo 3-in-1 is such a smart choice. Milo, energy to go further.
From Nestle. Every Harmattan, he falls sick so frequently and misses school often. I keep him away from junk food.
She also feeds me apples. She says an apple a day keeps...
If you want to keep germs away, then use Dettol soap regularly. Germs and disease spread easily during Harmattan. For this, use Dettol soap. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Dettol soap is endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association. Be Dettol sure.
We are all Nigerians. Against all odds, we shall and must remain united. We may have our challenges, our problems, and setbacks. However, together we shall overcome them all. What doesn't break us shall make us stronger. This is the mindset that shall bring peace, progress, and prosperity to our beloved country. Do not let tribal and religious sentiments govern how you think, act, or feel. Don't be influenced by those who want to destroy our precious national unity. Everybody who's a Nigerian is your brother and your sister. This is the mindset of the new Nigeria. It is also the mindset that we must all adopt. Let us support each other in creating the Nigeria of our dreams. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
The security situation in Nigeria has been reasonably stable in spite of activities of unpatriotic elements engaged in various criminal activities around the country. Daily situation reports coming in from states. 2 months ago, it has shown relative peace on many of our highways, such as Abuja, Kaduna, Birnin Gwari, Sokoto, Zamfara, Kaduna.
This message is brought to you from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerians, elections are here again. Let us shun violence. Let us play the game according to the rules. Do not be a thug. Say no to violence. Let's rise and defeat violence, crime, and sabotage against the peace of our nation. Nigeria is the only country we have. We must do everything to keep it united. We must avoid any act that promotes hate and disintegration. Say no to separatist movement, terrorism, fake news, hate speech, religious bigotry, and any act that tends to divide us as a nation. Watch out for strange gatherings and suspicious movements. Restrict access to sensitive documents and data, the disclosure of which may damage national security. Educate your staff and family, particularly on measures to safeguard information and report security breaches. Apply relevant legal security guidelines to protect yourself and your neighbors. Due to misinformation and wrong choices, some idle persons resort to vices in their greed to get rich quick. They resort to kidnapping, killings for rituals, and other heinous crimes. Avoid wrong use of the social media. Before you broadcast that false message, think twice. Ask whether it will promote peace or violence. For safety at home, still be security conscious. Educate your household on safety tips. Report all suspicious movements and persons to the security agencies nearest to you. Be a good citizen. Be patriotic. To pass security information, please call 0813-222-2105, 0915-339-1309, 0908-837-3514, or send a mail to dsspr@dss.gov.ng. This message is from the Department of State Services, DSS.
You're welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria. We still have our guest in the studio and we'll be discussing 2023 and election security. Let me bring in the INEC chair now. There have been reports of students who have registered at home, but now they're in school. And does that mean they have to go back home to register, to vote and leave the school? Or is there a provision for students to vote in their schools? I'm asking this question because most of these youths are the foot soldiers for these politicians. There's a risk factor if they are allowed to go back home and have holidays during the elections instead of staying in schools. Don't you think they'll be used?
No, I don't think so. My take on that matter is this. Where you registered is where you vote. If you allow yourself to be used as a tool in the hands of these politicians, their children are not here. Their children are all abroad.
What I'm saying is we have new voters, younger voters who registered before they came to the university at home.
Yes.
So now when it's
time to vote... They are not abroad.
Vote,
they are not abroad. They are in Nigeria.
Do they go back home and listen?
Yes. It will take one day to get to your place, vote, and come back.
What if you are in Maiduguri and then you have to vote in Bayelsa?
It will take 1.5 days to get to Bayelsa and vote and come back. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as the commission is concerned, where you register is where you will vote. There's no, in fact, there should be no noise about closing of school or not closing of school. That's why I said Nigerians should own the process. If you register to vote, that means you have a reason why you registered to vote. Go back home, vote, and come back. The money these students pay on betting, gambling, and all these things is more than enough for their transport to go home and come back. So if they are really serious to vote, I also have my children who are youth. And when they were registering, I told them, register where you will vote. And they register where they will vote. I don't need to give them transport to go because they registered where they are resident. So that's their business. They are youth. They are more than 18. For everybody to register, for anybody to register, you must be 18. You must be a free citizen. You must not have been convicted. So if they have met all these criteria and they have registered, they should simply go back to where they registered to vote for a candidate of their choice. If anybody asks them to come and register, the man should also give them money to come back, to come and vote. Ordinarily, voting is a civic responsibility. You don't need anybody to force you to do it. Nigerians should own the process. So those who registered should go back to where they registered and vote. INEC has nothing to do with that. What INEC had to do was to provide an enabling environment for people to register, provide an enabling environment for people to vote, and to make sure that their vote counts. That's the responsibility of INEC.
All right. Thank you very much, Lebari Sam Undu, on the points that you have raised. I was quite concerned myself when some persons began to then agitate that first they said NUC should issue a directive to all universities to shut down. Then later they said no, it should go to the Federal Ministry of Education. Later I said no, it's the president as visitor, but the president is visitor only to federal universities. There are state universities, there are also private universities. We just occasionally tend to complicate things. Say shut the schools for 1 week. These are schools that were closed for 8 months, and they are playing catch up for the lost grounds that they had. So they will go and vote for the presidential election, come back, go and vote for the governorship election. After that, you're having census. They will also go back. And you have a disruption to the actual. Anybody who is interested in voting would know that there will usually be a lockdown from midnight on Friday. I had Saturday up till about 4 o'clock or thereabout. So if you travel on a Thursday, you could get to your destination by Friday. If you travel on Thursday, by Friday you get to your destination. Saturday, go cast your vote. Sunday, you start heading back. If there are lectures, I remember some lecturers then, they will fix lecture at 8 a.m. on Monday. So that's
I know of some lecturers actually.
8 a.m. on Monday. You know, Monday can be a very lazy day for anybody. So you are stretching. Some of them could even set a test on that day, you know, or fix a test on that day. So anyway, those are issues that will be sorted out. We should be conscious of time. Time means money. And by the way, by the time you start granting all these holidays, you are also eating away the life of these individuals.
Yes.
Part of what we don't often discuss is say, oh, again, this is as we say in law, this is an obiter. To say, oh, they were on strike for 8 months. 8 months added to my age, for which you have to now play catch up, means that I will be older when I'm graduating.
Yes.
When you get into the labor market, at some point they will have a cutoff age. Applicants should not be older than 25, 27, 27, 25, 27. Nobody is going to listen to you that I graduated at the age of 28 because ASU was on strike 9 months when I was in year 2. ASU was on strike 8 months when I was in final year. And so children who could ordinarily have graduated at the age of 20, 21, are graduating at the age of 25. And then you want to add another 1 week. And then the same lecturers who are waiting for you, they say you haven't paid them. You know, for the, not arrears, for the period that they didn't work. No work, no pay. Anyway, let's not get back into the ASU argument. We had a lot of that on Good Morning Nigeria. Paul James.
Thank you for coming back to me.
Yeah,
because I want to react to that.
You want to react to that?
No, but that is not really tied to election security.
It is.
But no, hang on a second. We know that in the past, they had manipulated some students, some unions and so on and so forth. But let's face it, not everyone is amenable, you know, to such recruitment. On a broader scale, when we look at the threats to one general security of life and property in the country, and specifically to elections, can we mitigate those risks and threats so that wherever it's red becomes amber, if not green, in the next 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, of course. And I want to react to that, to what the INEC director has said, and also your last point, especially about students. If voting is if we want to look at voting from the human right angle as a fundamental right of those students, whatever has happened within this period is not, I mean, they were not responsible for it. And shouldn't also be blamed for what had happened. If voting is their right, and if voting is a matter of right, then we should begin to look at it from that angle and see how we can help them get through this process. Now, we had cited examples with lecturers setting up tests or exam just to punish students. We are talking about people who could travel for 1 day or 2 days, but we should also understand that these are people that also must subject to an authority. Before they will leave any school campus, they may have to take permission before they travel, unless you want to tell them to begin to take laws into their hands and do as they will. and which I see as a potential trigger. Back to the question about INEC earlier about...
No. That's, what right will be impaired? A student has the right. Well, nobody is saying you cannot vote. If you need to vote, you travel on a Thursday. I'll give you an example.
Without permission from the school?
You don't, but hang on a second. If the school authorities decide to say, we will declare Thursday and Friday as lecture-free days for you to travel for the election, wherever you want to vote, and you come back. A student may also say, look, I consider the exercise of my voting right more important than being in class. Yes, attendance is taken, but it is not mandatory that the student must attain 100% attendance to qualify for the exam and then for the course. A minimum cutoff usually will be around 70-75%, if not 80%. So a day or two absence won't hurt.
Well, let us start from the school authorities providing those leeway for students so they can exercise their franchise. That point also about INEC and not providing the kind of information that people want as a trigger. Now we go back to the PVC collection and all of those processes that happen. Recall by this time in 2019, we were getting either weekly or daily updates from INEC about the number of PVCs that have been collected and the PVCs that are uncollected. Within the window of 1 year that INEC did the continued voter registration exercise, INEC claimed it had registered 9 million Nigerians. How many of these PVCs were produced? We don't have information about that. Some states recently got the last batch of the PVCs that were produced, and when were those PVCs dispatched to the states? Let us be very honest and frank about this. Now, we are also going into an election that is going to be premised on a new electoral act, where we said the conclusiveness of the election will be determined by the PVCs collected. As we speak, barely 2 weeks to the election, we don't have information about the PVCs that have been collected or that have been produced. That is also another trigger.
I'm sorry. I will also just provide this information.
Okay.
Because I said we had back-to-back conversations on this.
On PVC.
INEC was arguing that they didn't need to extend the deadline for the collection of PVCs because they needed to gather all the information required so that they will have a proper tally, registered number of voters, PVCs collected. This is the data from all around the country. That was why at some point they were, if you may, adamant in extending the deadline. But pressure from members of the public enabled them to extend the deadline. And we hope that the point you have raised will also be listened to and acted on before voting commences.
Before INEC announced...
It's already been acted upon, and I'm sure by the end of this week, all this information he's talking about will be given. I want to assure you, and let me correct an impression. If PVC is provided, the time INEC used to send PVCs through vehicles and all that was gone. The last batch of PVCs that were printed were sent by air. And I know it because any PVC that comes in, any material that comes into the commission, before it goes out, I must sign. And when I sign, they will tell me, I will ask them, where are you going? They say, we are going to the airport. We are going to this. We are going to this. And I know of a fact that the chairman graciously approved funds for the airlifting of these PVCs and most of the sensitive materials to their area of need.
You keep saying graciously. It's his duty. It's his duty.
Graciously, I'm saying this.
I understand that is civil service language. Your prayers.
Bring in Kabir Adam there before, because we're running out of time. There's never enough time when we're discussing issues like this. Based on your risk assessment, can you give an idea of how the 2023 elections will roll out, security-wise?
You're asking me to look into the hour and make a prediction.
Yes, let's have a prediction.
In security, we have this saying: hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. We're hoping for the best, no doubt. We did 3 scenarios, and because this is a public forum, I will not speak of the worst scenario. I'll speak of the best scenario. The best scenario is that we have a peaceful transition. The winner is gracious in accepting victory, and the loser is also gracious.
Not the carry all.
Well, unfortunately, I'll be realistic here, is the nature of the Nigerian politician. Is a carry-all, person. And then the likelihood that the loser too sees losing as, suicide, actually. So that's the reality. But in 2014, we saw what happened. The victory was gracious. Sorry, 2015. Victory was gracious. The loser too was gracious. So we're hoping that our politicians go into the elections with that frame of mind. Having said that, there are 6 recognized strategies for managing electoral violence. I'll be a little bit circumspect in mentioning the 6 because that's how I get paid.
Okay.
But I must mention here that in ticking the checklist, we've done 3 in Nigeria.
So far.
Yes, and I'm very happy that we've done 3. Now the other 3 is what I'm hoping to see between now and the day of the elections. Having said that, I'm a little bit worried by the statement by Dr. Habila. I'm a risk manager, and at the same time, I believe in humanitarian principles. We shouldn't take out people. We should use the law. If they offend, if their offenses are captured under our laws, then we should do the right thing. In other words, if our law says someone is existing as a criminal, what does the law provide that we should do for him? I would rather have that than use the word take out. In other words, no security organization has the right to keep anyone in detention without prosecuting that person. If that person is committing an offense, arrest him and subject him to our criminal justice system. I would rather be happier with that, and I'm sure he would buttress that point because he's in the civil society space. We need to protect the rights of our citizens, irrespective of who they are. If they are committing offenses and it is clear, now that is one way to manage the possible outcome. The third point I would like to emphasize, we've had the benefit of monitoring and observing elections in another locations. The most recent one that has the same dimensions within the eco space like we have in Nigeria is in Kenya. Now, what did they do to manage some of these components? Because they also have the same challenge that we have. Let me give you an example. And I think Dr. Abila kind of dribbled that point. He did mention it, that we need to bring in stakeholders. But we have the platform, and that platform is not active. That is the excess at the state and local government level. It is not only the traditional rulers that will be members at that level, at the state and local government. Every other stakeholder, the market women, as an example, the youths, name them, they would all be members of that. So if we activate these platforms at the state and local government level, it means the intelligence fit. INEC has a situation room, and if time had permitted, the director would have spoken about that. Now that the framework for managing risk at INEC is robust, and the fit coming into that situation room includes from excess. And if we expand excess to the state and local government level, then that fit will become a veritable tool. Earlier on, you asked me a question regarding the transient nature of threat elements. That is the answer. But we need to activate it. Now, there is my concluding statement. Trust is good, Kingsley, but control is better. So that means monitoring and evaluation will have to be enhanced.
Lower levels of ISIS.
Exactly. Now, the legacy of the military rule makes it very difficult for a civilian person, in this instance the chair of INEC, to have that kind of authority and power over members of excess. But that's what the National Assembly needs to change. Empower INEC in a manner that they would be able to have some level of control over the activities of excess through M&E, monitoring and evaluation.
All right, Dr. Kabir Adamu, thank you very much. Gentlemen, let's recognize something. The country has been battling with the influx and possession of small arms and light weapons. Last week in Imo State, a customary court judge was attacked by gunmen who came into the court premises on motorcycles. They shot him and they killed him.
Yes.
With effect from today, lawyers in Imo State have gone on strike, boycotting the courts. Can we begin to worry about a situation where gunmen could disrupt voting in particular locations, especially against the provision of the Electoral Act with respect to disturbances in the course of voting or disruption of voting in a particular unit? And we recognize that no matter how you proliferate the environment with security personnel, you cannot police every square inch.
No, you cannot.
Yes, and on that note, we thank our guest for coming on the program. In the studio here, Lebari Sam Undo, Director Security at the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Dr. Habila Josak, retired Deputy Inspector General of
I wanted to make a correction.
A correction,
yes.
briefly.
Yes, I didn't say
in 10 seconds. Please.
Yes, I didn't say that those people that were identified as those that are likely to, tamper with the process are brought and kept. They are being interrogated, and those of them that are culpable are being charged to court, and the other ones who are found innocent are
been released.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Habila Josak, retired Deputy Inspector General of Police. Thank you so much for coming. In our Abuja studio also, Dr. Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Expert. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Paul James, Director Election Program, Yaga Africa. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's been Good Morning Nigeria for today. Join us again tomorrow for another insightful edition of the program. I am John Moe.
I am Kingsley Osadolo saying, have a nice day.